You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This episode is about my new book, Becoming an Entrepreneur: How to Find Freedom and Fulfillment as a Business Owner. And the book has just been released on Amazon as an ebook. So what I'd like to do is to tell you about the book and the ideas in it, and also about my experience of writing and self-publishing it, including some of the struggles that I had. And I'd like to tell you about some interesting things that I did, crowdsourcing feedback on this book, and some really great experiences that I had interacting with listeners of The Voluntary Life in that process. And I'd also like to tell you a bit about future plans for the book and how you can get hold of a copy and what it can do for you. So the book's just been released. It's on Amazon as an ebook. You can get it for Kindle. If you don't have a Kindle device, you can obviously just use the free Kindle app on any of your computer or tablet or phone or any other reading device. So I could just describe to you the book, but rather than do that, what I'd like to do is to read you the first reviews that have just come in. So the book's been out for a couple of days, and I've got 5 reviews. They're really intelligent reviews, and I'm so grateful to the people who've already reviewed my book. All the reviews so far are 5-star, which I'm very grateful for. So just to give you an overview, a flavour of what the book is like, here's what the people who've read it so far have been saying about it. So this review is from Emily Croteau, and the title is Excellent Toolkit for Aspiring Entrepreneurs. Emily says, there are a lot of how-to business books out there already, but this one is unique for its consideration of the psychological dimensions of starting a business, which it approaches with remarkable sensitivity. Specifically, it looks at the cultural factors that contribute to a mindset of employee conditioning, a recurring theme in the book that must be examined and overcome to successfully make the leap into entrepreneurism. This makes it potentially very useful for current students or anyone currently working as an employee. One challenge of the book is its scope, from the total non-entrepreneur to the successful business owner, but I found that even parts that were less personally relevant to me, a recent college graduate working for a startup while hoping to save up the funds to launch my own freedom business, were fun to read and kindled exciting visions for the future. For someone who is already operating a successful business, the later chapters have a lot of suggestions and ideas, and I imagine that the early chapters would offer an interesting opportunity for self-reflection. The writing is cheerful and inspiring, and at 88 pages, it reads quickly and doesn't drag. Some of the business advice will be familiar, but there are lots of gems. I recommend it to anyone with an interest in the topic. Lovely review. Thank you so much, Emily. The next one is by Thomas Bell. The title of Tom's review is, I'm left buzzing with enthusiasm for just free-falling right into entrepreneurship. Tom says, I first picked up this book feeling left out of the elite club of business ownership. I wasn't confident in the value I have to offer, and I didn't know where to start sharing my value sustainably. Now, after putting it down though, I'm left buzzing with enthusiasm for just free-falling right into entrepreneurship and finally leaving the airless world of employeehood behind. What makes Jake's approach so accessible and down-to-earth is the fact that he speaks from his own hard-won experience. Some chapters gave me the drive and inspiration that I was needing, and others got down to brass tacks and showed me the technical side of making a business really work at its best. The book will save anyone years of reinventing the wheel before stumbling upon their best strategy. Jake lays out the options which face bootstrapping individuals clearly and concisely. I'm certain I'll need to refer back to this resource along my journey for guidance again and again. That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Tom. The next one is from Zolt Baboksai, and it's called No Nonsense Guide to Quitting the Rat Race. Zolt says, whether you're a business owner or an employee fantasizing about breaking free, this book will be an invaluable resource. The first few chapters give you intellectual ammunition to break out of your employee conditioning and figure out what kind of business you want to start, while the rest of the book is full of real-world actionable advice that you can put into practice to improve your business today. Personally, I found the chapter about funding especially useful, as it has always been a dilemma whenever I was about to start a business. The chapter, quote, make yourself redundant, unquote, makes some important points that many business owners tend to forget about, only to find themselves working 14-hour days and headed for burnout. What I like most about the book is the way it's written. Straightforward, concise, and to the point. Many authors fill hundreds of pages with stories, background information, and unessential detail, giving you the job of deciphering and extracting their message that could be summed up in a few sentences. Jake DeSillis manages to provide enough detail and context to understand everything in just 88 pages. Read, think, and JFDI.
Awesome, thank you, Zolt.
This next review is from Matt McCormick, and it's called Relevant in Any Stage of Your Entrepreneurial Journey. Matt says, I read a lot of books on business and entrepreneurship. The trouble with most of them is that they paint a rosy picture or only contain advice specific to the path that they followed. Becoming an entrepreneur is different, is very straightforward, and covers all the different stages that entrepreneurs go through. While other books focus mainly on motivation or tactics exclusively, Becoming an Entrepreneur is a good mix of both. Reading through it, I found it motivated me to keep going whilst also providing practical advice. If there's any book I would recommend to people in the early stages of their entrepreneurship journey, this would be it.
Lovely review. Thank you, Matt.
And this last review is from R. Brown. It's called A Methodical Approach to Success as an Entrepreneur. R. Brown says, entrepreneurship provides a great path towards personal freedom and, paradoxically, towards personal security. I've started a few businesses of my own. A couple were highly successful and I sold them for a good profit. A couple muddled along and a couple failed to thrive. My approach was always a bit happy-go-lucky, and I would have done things differently if Jake's book had been around back then. Jake DeSillis takes a measured, considered approach to entrepreneurship. He doesn't leave things to chance if they can be measured, organized, and nurtured. Those who followed this thinking person's guide to building a business are likely to have an easier time of it than I did. Jake is not an armchair businessman. He has experienced the difficulties of building a business and has worked to implement the solutions. As a result, he was able to sell his business after less than a decade for enough that he would be able to retire. His guidance is not abstract, but based on clear knowledge and understanding of the process of entrepreneurship. Jake also understands why many find it so difficult to start for themselves. The current social and educational culture is built around the training of worker drones, and many people do not realize that the world of entrepreneurship is open to them. This book provides both the motivation and the tools for any hard-working person to build their own business. I recommend it.
Great review, thank you so much.
All of those reviews are 5-star reviews, and I'm so grateful for all the thought that everyone who's reviewed the book has put into their reviews, and for all the lovely things they said about the book. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to read you those reviews because I think they provide a really good overview of the experience of reading the book, and I hope that helps give you an idea about what the book is like. I just wanted to add that I've written this because I am really passionate about the opportunity for freedom and fulfillment that entrepreneurship provides, and it's something that when I started as an entrepreneur, I really didn't know what I was doing. I had a lot of drive, but I was kind of making it up as I went along, and this book is my attempt to demystify entrepreneurship and to put together all of the most valuable principles that I've found, principles that will work in any industry, in any business that you want to start. Some of the principles are quite counterintuitive. For example, it was quite difficult for me to really come to understand that part of the process of being an entrepreneur is to make yourself redundant, to remove yourself from day-to-day business so that you can focus on building the business rather than working in it. So I've tried to explain all of these principles in as simple and non-technical way as possible, using as little jargon as possible. You don't need a lot of business expertise in order to understand the book, and it should be relevant to you at any stage of your thinking about entrepreneurship. If you have not yet started and you want to start a business, or if you're already an entrepreneur but you want more freedom and fulfillment from the whole experience, and you want a set of principles to guide you, then this book is for you. That's exactly what I've tried to put together. So that gives you an overview of the book itself. I wanted to also tell you about the experience of writing it. I've been working on the book for over a year. I took some breaks to work on other projects as well, but the whole writing process has taken over a year. But the preparation for the book started a long time before that. I started thinking about the principles of entrepreneurship when I was an entrepreneur myself. During the 10 years of running my business, I was learning as much as I could. I paid for business coaching. I read everything that I could about entrepreneurship. and to really try and be more conscious as an entrepreneur myself. Then after I sold the business, I started the podcast, The Voluntary Life. And as you know, if you're listening to this podcast, I've done a whole series of episodes on entrepreneurship. So that was really all preparation for this book too, because in the process of doing those episodes, I did additional research and preparation. And I also received feedback from listeners, which was really helpful, pointing out things that didn't make sense that I was saying, or gaps in the arguments, or other issues that I hadn't covered, and so forth. So then when I came to write this book, I had a huge amount of material from the podcasts. And I started that at the beginning of 2013. And fairly quickly, by about March or April, I had a first draft of the book, because I had so much material already. And I really enjoyed that period of writing. But I got to the point where I had 50,000 words. And then I went into a period of editing, which was kind of the dark night of the soul of this book. It was a really difficult process, because this is the first book that I've written, and I had a huge amount of stuff that I wanted to say about entrepreneurship, but I also wanted this to be easily digestible and short and to the point and useful. So I went from 50,000 words down to 25,000 words, and that process was difficult. I had to decide, what was essential and what was stuff that you would probably be able to find elsewhere or might be useful, but isn't really a part of this book about becoming an entrepreneur. So I do have a huge amount of material that I'm going to also publish that I've written already. For example, I have a book on negotiation that is going to come out fairly soon, and I'll tell you more about that when that does come out. But that's all material that I've taken out of this initial book, because I think it's kind of a separate subject. But that editing process was really, really difficult. And during the process of editing, I also did a huge amount of additional research. Once I got all my own ideas down, I went back and read other books on entrepreneurship that had been written in the meantime since I had sold my business, just to bring myself up to date and make sure that I've covered all of what I think are the most fundamental, important ideas that you need to know. And throughout the book, I make reference to other useful further reading and things that you might like to read too. So I hope that this book is also a launch point for you to find other useful things to read too. So the next stage in this book was to get feedback on the text that I'd written. I had a completed draft that I'd cut down from 50,000 to 25,000 words. And I wanted to make sure that the arguments were rock solid and that the text was really easy to read and really fun to read too. So I went through and I managed to convince about 10 friends of mine to read the book and give me feedback on it, and that was enormously helpful. But I also wanted to get feedback from the listeners to The Voluntary Life. So I decided to crowdsource the feedback, and what I did was to put a podcast up, which you may have heard, asking for beta readers for the book. I put that out and I got a really fantastic response. I was so pleased that 47 people agreed to read the book. And of those 47 people, 23 people were able to get back with comments in the timescale that I needed them in order to be able to use them for the book. So I had 23 marked up manuscripts, and the vast majority of them were super detailed. They were finding grammar errors and language errors, but they were also commenting on the text, identifying issues. And I have to say, I was so overwhelmed at the kindness and generosity and intelligence of my listeners. You guys are super smart, generous, lovely people, and I was really, really touched to receive all the support that I did in writing this book. And I learned a huge amount from the feedback that I got from listeners as well. The book is far, far better because of the involvement of listeners to The Voluntary Life. Maybe it would be different if this was a fiction book, that you could say maybe that you could get into a situation of too many cooks spoil the broth. But for a non-fiction book like this, it was incredibly helpful, because all of the comments that I got back forced me to look at the text again and say, okay, is this argument valid and clear, and does it follow, and is it easily readable, and is it easily understandable? And so I changed the book in light of all that feedback, and the book is much better for it. And the last thing I want to say about the beta readers, who were all listeners to of the Voluntary Life, is what a fascinating, diverse group of people they are. I mean, if that is representative of my listeners, it's fascinating to me that people from all walks of life, from all stages of life, from all backgrounds, both people with a lot of entrepreneurial experience and people with no entrepreneurial experience. And I think the book is also improved because I was able to get that kind of diversity in the feedback. The final part of the process in self-publishing was to send it to a professional copy editor. And I had a great copy editor called Cheryl who helped me go through and identify other grammatical and language issues and basically to make the style consistent. Because I had to choose, for example, whether or not to go for US or English spelling. And I've gone for American spelling and grammar because the vast majority of my listeners are based in the States. But I also wanted to make sure that, you still hear my voice in the book. So I had to think very carefully about whether or not converting some phrases into American English equivalent was taking it too far away from my voice. And so I think what I've done is to capture my voice but put it in American spelling and punctuation. And we used a consistent style sheet and everything, so that was all great. I also had a beautiful cover design by a guy called Will Moyer, which you'll see on the show notes. I'll include it. And the final stage was to get the book uploaded into Amazon. And that has actually been a huge learning process for me over the last year as well. I've invested a lot of time learning how to use a program called Scrivener, which is a very powerful writer's package for writing and publishing. And it's got a huge number of tools for writers. And it also does conversion to ebooks and things like that. So that was the last stage in the publishing process. And the book is now live and it's on Amazon. It's $4.99 or about £3 sterling UK. So I wanted to finish by just telling you a little bit about future plans. I do have plans to release both a paperback version and an audiobook version. The plan for me is to use the revenue from the ebook to finance the paperback because I want to get a professional design for the paperback. The thing about ebooks is that every device will change the formatting slightly. So you need a really clean and simple format for the ebook so that each device will render it in their own font and make it look really nice. And that means, for example, that I can't really control the layout of line breaks on some of the quotes. I have some beautiful quotations in the book at the beginning of each chapter from very diverse people, entrepreneurs, philosophers, writers, and it would be nice to ensure that the quotes were broken up in the right place, but with an e-reader because you can't control the layout. That's the kind of thing that I can't really control. On the print version, I'm going to have the ability to have a beautiful layout. And one thing that quite a few beta readers suggested was to illustrate the book and to have specific formatting for some sections. Like I have a summary at the end of each chapter of the key ideas for all the technical chapters, and that could be offset in a special way so that you can find the summaries easily. So these are the kinds of things that I'd like to do, and the idea is to use the revenue from the ebook sales to finance the paperback. And I'm also going to do an audiobook, but I need to be back in the UK to do that because I just can't get good audio in Mexico. It's such a noisy place. And so that will wait until I'm back in the UK. Those are the plans that I've got for the book. So I just wanted to end by saying that I really hope that you will read the book. As I say in the book, I think that everyone could be an entrepreneur. We could all be entrepreneurs in one vast interconnected network of independent contractors. And I think that everyone would be far happier for it as well. So wherever you're at thinking about entrepreneurship, I do hope that you will read the book. And I also want to say that if you're listening to this, if you would like to review the book, either on Amazon or on your blog or anywhere visible, I will happily give you a review copy. So just email me, jake@thevoluntarylife.com, and tell me that you are going to review the book and let me know where you're going to put it. And I'm very happy to give you a free review copy for you to do that. What I most need now is reviews. That's the key thing for me at this stage. I cannot get enough reviews. The more the better. So I hope you'll read the book and I hope you'll review it. And I'd love to hear what you think. Please do let me know what you think of the book. I'm very, very interested. One of the nicest things about the experience of writing this book has been getting to know some of my listeners a lot better. And I would love to hear from more of you as well. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email jake@thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevoluntarylife.com.